Hello, everyone. Welcome to NSLI Interactive's second virtual event of the 2021-2022 academic year, entitled Artistic Pursuits on the NSLI-Y Program. My name is Alexander, and I work for the NSLI-Y team at Iron USA. My colleague Kyle will be helping out with this event as well. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Before we start with the presentation today, let's quickly go over some functions in Zoom, as well as the outline for the event. You can feel free to rename yourself and make sure that you'll be muted while fellow presenters are speaking. This is in webinar format, so you won't have access to your microphone or camera. That being said, the event will begin with a brief introduction to the NSLI-Y program and a short icebreaker question. Then each of our 4 alumni panelists will give a presentation, and I will introduce each one of them beforehand. After this time, we will have a dedicated question and answer session with the panelists. So please, throughout the webinar, think of any questions you may want to ask. And when that time comes, you could type your questions into the chat box. At the same time, throughout the webinar, you can feel free to use the Q&A feature on Zoom in order to ask any questions that you have. As a reminder, this event will end at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And for those who cannot join us today, we are recording this webinar and we'll post it on our NSLI-Y Interactive website. And if you're watching from Facebook, you can also ask questions or add any comments there as well. Next slide, please. Before our speakers present, I want to give some background information for anyone not familiar with the NSLI-Y program. The National Security Language Initiative for Youth, known as NSLI-Y, is a scholarship program for American high school students funded by the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Every year, NSLI-Y brings around 600 students overseas to study a critical language, such as Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Korean, Russian, Turkish, and Persian, for a summer or academic year. Students on the NSLI-Y program immerse themselves in the local culture, practice citizen diplomacy, and work to become experts in their language. The NSLI-Y program has a lifelong impact, and our speakers today will speak to that. Next slide, please. So today we will hear from 4 NSLI-Y alumni of the Arabic and Hindi summer and academic year programs. I will introduce each of them before they present. So first, I will be introducing Bliss, who is our first speaker. Next slide. Bliss is an alumnus of the 2016 NSLI-Y Summer Hindi program held in Indore, India. As a student of classical languages, he chose to study Hindi because of his interest in examining the linguistic relations between Hindi, as well as its ancestor Sanskrit, and Latin and ancient Greek, which he had studied in high school. He graduated from Harvard College in 2021 with a joint bachelor's degree in computer science and classical languages and literature. He will always be grateful for the role NSLI-Y played in cementing his lifelong passion for languages, global affairs, and intercultural understanding. So Bliss, why don't you get us started?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bliss, and today I'll speak about some of the opportunities I had during 2016 in India with NSLI for art and dance and music. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. I'll start with a brief introduction. I'll keep this short. So yeah, I participated in 2016. I studied at the Shishikund International School in Indore, India, which is it's a city of about 2 million people in the central part of the country. After NSLI, I went on to study computer science and classics in college, and now I work in the tech industry in Washington, D.C. Next slide, please. So the first point I'll make about artistic opportunities on NSLI was the extracurriculars we had at our host school, Shishikund. So while our cohort took special English classes taught for visitors at the school, our extracurriculars were actually integrated with the local Indian students and provided a great opportunity to make new friends and practice our Hindi through these activities. Although some days I went to play sports with my host brother, many days I participated in the art activities offered by the school. I took a few lessons in the tabla, which is an Indian type of drum. I went to dance class a few times. I joined a singing group, and I also tried my hand at clay sculpting. One of my favorite activities on the program was making rangoli, as you can see in these photos, which is a traditional South Asian art form, also known by its Tibetan name mandala, which is highly significant in local religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism. All of these activities offered great opportunities to reinforce some lessons we learned in Hindi class, actually, whether counting ek, do, teen, char, 1, 2, 3, 4, to the beat of the tabla, learning new vocabulary during Hindi songs, or remembering the colors when making rangoli. Fun fact, the word rangoli actually comes from the Hindi word rang, meaning color. Next slide, please. The experience with the arts during NSLI also extended to our host family life as well. One of my host family's hobbies was organizing and choreographing fashion shows featuring Indian and Western clothing and dance every few months in different venues around the city. I signed up for this as soon as possible, thinking it'd be a great cultural experience, and was placed in the Indian dance routine, as you can see in the photo here. Besides meeting new friends during the rehearsals, one of my favorite parts of this experience was going to the marketplace to get fitted for the kurta pajama, the outfit which I'm wearing in this photograph. While at the marketplace, I got to learn new vocabulary for clothing and even practice my Hindi mental math when my family put me on the spot to barter with the shopkeeper. The day of the performance, after the runway walk here and the dance routine, I had the opportunity to give a quick speech in Hindi to the audience, which is another example of how language learning and the arts went hand in hand during my NSLI-Y experience. Next slide, please. Finally, our group had one last artistic finale at the end of the summer during Shishakunj's celebration of Indian Independence Day. I thought it was a really good coincidence that our program began on July 4th and ended on Indian Independence Day, which was a nice representation of the ties between the US and India, which programs like NSLI-Y hope to foster. On that day, our school had no classes, and our cohort was instead invited to participate in a dance performance celebrating the holiday, including students of all ages from kindergarten and to high school. The girls in our group practiced an elaborate dance routine, while the boys, like myself, served as flag wavers, as you can see in the photo. What I really enjoyed about this activity was the chance to actually get to know some of the younger students, as you could see next to us in the photo, because I found that it was actually easier to speak with them in Hindi since they didn't quite know English as well as the older students like my host brother, and were more willing to point out any vocabulary or grammar mistakes I was making so I could learn really quickly while speaking with them. Next slide, please. So yeah, that was a brief introduction to my experience with the arts in India, experiences which helped both my language learning and cultural immersion process. Thanks for listening, and happy to answer any questions after all the presentations about the arts or in general, just about my time in India with NSLI. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Bliss. That was really interesting to hear about the various artistic experiences that you had and how that enhanced your language learning. So now I will introduce our next speaker, Dana. So Dana is an alumna of the 2015 and 2017-2018 NSLI-Y Arabic programs. She is currently a senior at Cornell University, where she studies Arabic linguistics and North African language revitalization movements in an interdisciplinary research program. NSLI-Y inspired her to seek out opportunities to share the joy of language learning with others. Since completing her program, she has taught both Arabic and English to youth and adults from around the world, developed and facilitated curriculum for virtual exchange programs, and continued her studies of Arabic through the Salam, Sabla, and Critical Language Scholarship programs. Dana, why don't you start?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out virtually tonight. I know everybody's probably dying of Zoom fatigue by this point, but it's really exciting to have you all here. I'm really looking forward to sharing my experiences with Arabic and with music with you guys. If you want to skip to the next slide, I can talk a little bit. Yeah, so I thought to call this brief little talk I'm going to give When Words Fail, because I think we've all probably heard the old adage of when words fail, music speaks. And as cliched as that expression is, I think it's really important, especially when you're learning languages, and especially if you're a musician who's learning languages, because on programs like NSLI-Y or other kinds of overseas immersion programs, you're going to run into so many different so many different challenges with regards to language. There are going to be a lot of times where you don't know what's going on around you. There are going to be a lot of times where you have no idea what to say or how to contribute to a conversation. But when you have music up your sleeve, or art, or some other kind of communication that integrates language but also transcends it, you have an incredibly powerful tool to make every time words fail, not a failure, but a chance to, develop more understanding and to have fun, and to learn a lot about the place you're living in. So a little bit of background about my NSLI experience. I was an Arabic student with NSLI-Y 2 times, in Marrakesh in 2015, and in Rabat from 2017 to 2018. So both of those cities are incredibly musical places, and this was astounding to me. I come from a very small rural part of my state in Virginia. So I never had an experience where I could walk out of my house and within 5 minutes of leaving pass by 3 different bands playing on the street, or groups of dancers or drummers or singers of all stripes, from all walks of life, from all corners of the country. But almost as soon as I arrived in Marrakesh, and more importantly in Rabat, I realized that that was the city. I could leave my house at any night of the week, or day for that matter, and encounter musicians everywhere I went. And as somebody who had been, writing music and playing my entire life, this was so exciting. So I first kind of dipped my toes into artistic pursuits, and if you want to hit the next slide, we can get there. I first kind of dipped my toes into the waters of music in Rabat about 5 days after I landed in 2017. So I was still pretty jet lagged and delirious. But one of our introductory activities was actually going to an open mic night at a local music venue called Cafe Renaissance. And being me, and being, 18 and fresh off the airplane, I thought it would be a great idea to sign up for this open mic night and sing a song spontaneously that I'd written, several years prior, actually, about Morocco. And not realizing that one of my language partners was recording me, which has resulted in the present very cringe video that you are about to witness. But this was my first experience kind of playing in front of a live audience in Morocco. And I actually thought it would be a great idea to introduce the song in Arabic. So it was an integration of the language and the music, and the Arabic makes me cringe, but I want to play a little bit of the video for you. If you want to hit play and then skip to like 20 seconds in roughly. If it doesn't work, that's fine too. Honestly, it's embarrassing for me. So well, I don't think there's any sound, but that's okay. This is just me. I stood up and I started introducing my song and saying, this is why I wrote it, and this is where it came from in my head, and then I played. And it was the most exciting experience I think I had on that trip, was that one, because people started playing behind me and around me and clapping and drumming, and there was a pianist who got up and started playing on the keys. It was incredible, and it made me realize that this music that I had always kind of just done as a hobby really had a particular power to build connections across cultures, and build connections even where my language couldn't do it yet. Because at this point I could speak Arabic, but I wasn't great at it, and I wasn't super confident in the dialect. But I found that through music, I could connect with people, whether I was speaking in Arabic or singing in Arabic or in English. But if you want to hit next slide now, that would be awesome. I'm sorry about the video thing. I thought it would be cool, but the technicality of it is a little odd, I know. I guess just kind of going on with the story, but needless to say, after this this Cafe Renaissance experience, my first week, music became an integral part of my life. When I was in Rabat, I started going to these open mic nights regularly once a week, and I would also just pretty much every time on the weekend I would go out for a walk or go for a walk after class, I would seek out groups of musicians. Sometimes I would just sit in silence and listen to them. Sometimes I would play with them. Sometimes they would ask me to sing various songs that they knew. And through those interactions, I not only developed language skills, because these were happening in a dialect that I'd never studied before. And these conversations were happening in Arabic, which was very challenging, but also very rewarding. I was also learning how I could use this kind of hobby that I had to really build connections with people and to practice Arabic. I also started to learn a lot more Moroccan music, which was great fun and is still something that I use to this day. Playing in public, playing at these open mic nights, on the street, on the beach, with friends, with strangers, all of those experiences really showed me what it meant to know kind of the core canon of Arabic crowd pleasers. I got to a point where I could, play a solid 5 songs that without fail people loved. And that was critical not only for language skills, because I learned, how to sing in Arabic. There's differences in technique and there's differences in the structure and the sound of words. But I also learned how to connect with people, again, across that language barrier. NSLI-Y is a program about language learning, and that's central to the mission of the program. But even as you're learning, it's very humbling as well, because you witness yourself developing and you witness yourself building these language skills. And I'm sorry, somebody is making a lot of noise outside. You witness yourself building these language skills, but you also have a lot of experiences where you feel like you haven't learned anything. Because the majority of it is kind of a day-to-day grind. You're, putting in the time, you're making the flashcards, you're doing the grammar drills, but it takes time to build those skills. Playing music and talking to people, forming those relationships, even if they're brief, with individuals outside of class, is critical to maintaining your confidence and your positive attitude when you're learning a language. That was one of the best things that music did for me. It was always relaxing. It was always something I did for my mental health. But it was also great for my mental health in terms of language learning. It was great for kind of maintaining motivation and confidence to keep studying Arabic and to keep, putting in that effort in class, because of all of the things I was seeing myself gain outside of it. These are just a few pictures of, various music experiences and events that I encountered during that year. I played at, there was a street art event that I played at. I, played at, class events where we went with language partners to barbecues, and, groups of musicians would come play outside the building, the Parliament building, when the king would come to visit, and I would go talk with them and sing with them. All of these encounters were enormously instructive, both linguistically and culturally, and really helped me adjust and helped me feel at home in this new place. Next slide, please. It's just that's a brief clip of one of my friends from school actually came with me, and we just went hunting for people to play music with, and that was the result. But yeah, one of the best things, so during my year I was engaged in all of this, and it was phenomenal, life-changing. You've heard it all before, I'm sure, but one of the things that I realized after I got back was how impactful this had been, not only on my language learning, but on my leadership skills and on the ways that I was able to then go out into the world and kind of spread the love that I had found for Arabic to others. So in the next slide, sorry about that. So after coming home, actually, I was fortunate because my first job out of high school and out of NSLI-Y was at an Arabic immersion camp. And while I was working in that camp, I became the de facto music director. It was immersion, so we weren't allowed to use any English. So I was sharing all of the songs that I had learned in Morocco with youth from all across the United States. And it was so fun and exciting to see, first of all, to learn how to teach using music, but also to see how I could turn these songs that I loved into songs that my kids loved too, that my students were, engaged with. There's a very special feeling that you get when you're singing a song that you've loved for years and suddenly other people start to join you. And they know what they're saying. They know the words in this new language that some of them just started learning, 2 weeks ago. So doing that, I did that in person for a couple of years. And then when camp moved virtual, I gave virtual music lessons to campers. That was incredibly fun. I really got to keep using both music and Arabic long after the program finished. And until today, I'm a member of the classical Arabic music ensemble at my university, which was totally out of my comfort zone because I never played any classical style Arabic music prior to undergrad. But entering school, I found a community and a place where I could continue, learning about Arabic, singing songs from different parts of the Arab world, and really developing skills and confidence throughout. So I found that art, particularly music for me, because that's the art that I've always kind of sought refuge in, is both comforting and challenging, particularly in a language learning context. It's comforting because it is constant. In a sense, there are differences in, types of art and types of music throughout the world, and they're deeply culturally embedded, but music is music, no matter where you are and no matter what language it's in. And no matter how, difficult and overwhelming life could seem at times, no matter how overwhelming the task of acquiring Arabic could feel, I knew that music would be a comfort because I knew I could go back to it in Arabic or in English and feel like I was building something. It was challenging because it taught me a whole new way of singing and speaking and thinking. It really complemented my language learning in tangible ways. We studied songs in my Arabic classes. Like I said, when I taught Arabic later on, I had to learn songs in different dialects from all across the region. But throughout it all, I really found that when words fail, music does speak. And even when words don't fail, music gives them a gravity that they wouldn't have otherwise. So as a takeaway, if you're an applicant, if you're considering applying, do it, get those apps in. It's so worth it. If you're an alumni, keep using your language, keep finding the joy in it. And no matter where you're at in life, I think the most important thing is to find what brings you joy and find a way to bring your language into that. Because if you can do that, you will never want to stop learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that great presentation and tying in how important having a passion is with language learning and how it motivates you and reinforces one another. Really appreciated that. Next up, we have Megan. So Megan is an alumna of the 2019 NSLI-Y Hindi summer program. She is currently a second-year university student studying health policy and management and chemistry on a pre-med track. Since participating in NSLI-Y, Megan has decided to pursue a minor in Hindi Urdu. In her free time, Megan enjoys dancing, playing soccer, and napping. In the future, Megan hopes to work as a gynecologic oncologist. Megan, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind? Okay, great. Yeah, so I spent my summer of 2019 in Pune, India, which is a city in Maharashtra. It's a couple hours away from Mumbai, just to give you a little bit of location, since I know not all of you might not know where that is. Yeah, he kind of already introduced what I'm doing. I also work for the National Institutes of Health, which is kind of related, but I might get into that later. But yeah, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. Yeah, so one of the most integral parts of my experience studying abroad through NSLI-Y was definitely dance. I think that, kind of going off of some themes we've already talked about, not only did dance allow me to kind of bridge the gaps between some language barriers to connect with some people that I interacted with over my trip, but it also allowed me to really connect with my host family and really, I guess, get integrated into the culture that I was now kind of being a part of. So I think those are the two big things that I was able to get out of dance in India. And I also think that it allowed me to have a lifelong impact, specifically with dance. So while in Pune, I actually took a Kathak class about 3 times a week with my host sister. So part of the experience with NSLI-Y, I don't know how it works for all the programs, but at least for the summer program in Pune, you stay with a host family and you often have host siblings. And the host siblings are really instrumental and kind of getting you integrated into the community, because you will go to like their school when you go to learn languages. So my host sister was definitely really, really helpful in having conversations to learn Hindi. So yeah, I went to cut the classes with her a few times a week, and those were taught entirely in Marathi and in Hindi. It was a blend between the two. English was not allowed in the class. So that was kind of I just kind of got dumped into it. I didn't know any Hindi. It was like the first week I was there. I was just learning like my letters, and there was a teacher yelling at me in Marathi. And yeah, it was it was definitely a very quick awakening of this is a great way to learn language, but it was also a really great way for me to learn a new style of dance. I didn't really have a dance background before I got to India, but suddenly I was dancing basically every day of the week, because when I wasn't in class with my host sister, I was dancing in school or out in the community. Because as a cohort, I don't think we really mentioned this so far, but there are several kind of lessons you go through each day. So we kind of had like an extracurricular activity every day. So you do like language class for, let's say, like 6 hours a day, and then you do 1 hour of an extracurricular activity. So our extracurricular activities were dance class once a week, an art class once a week, a music class once a week, and then physical education once a week. So my favorite was dance class, and in that class we were able to rehearse I think 3 different dances to be performed at this like end of session reception that we had. And so that was one thing that we did. And then in the classroom, for every unit that we had in vocabulary, our Hindi teacher would come up with songs and dances to help us remember that vocabulary, which I always found really, really helpful because they were really fun. So they were really catchy, and I still sing them to this day, just because it's how I remember it so well. But at the time, it was really instrumental in remembering certain grammar and certain vocabulary. And so that was always a lot of fun. So that was one way that we incorporated songs and dances into our lessons. And then every day, just about, we would do some sort of skit with the new like language that we were learning. So we'd go off into groups and be really creative and get to make our own skits to be performed to the class, which really helped me to feel comfortable to speak a new language in front of other people. And then in the community, one thing that we did was we performed the dances that we had been rehearsing at a kind of community gathering, and we also sung at that. And that part was really fun to me because a few attendees actually came up to me afterwards and they spoke to me in Hindi about how much they loved my performance, which was really cool to me because I felt like I was able to connect with other people about dance, but in another language that I was now feeling pretty comfortable with because I was at the end of the session. And then another really cool event that I had where I was able to use art to kind of overcome language barriers is one thing that we did is we went to a Marathi medium school, which is like a state school. And so the kids there actually didn't speak any English. So one project that we did is we did like an art project together, which I don't have a picture on here, but it was really hard at first because their Hindi actually wasn't the best either because their first language was Marathi, but you know, really not being able to communicate in a common language as much as we tried to communicate in Hindi. We were kind of at the same level in Hindi, which I thought was pretty fun. But being able to connect through art was really cool to me. So definitely something that I was able to take away from in a lesson that I learned that, you know, again, when words fail, like Dana was saying, there's art always. So that was really, I guess, impactful to me. And then this is just something to throw in there. One thing that really, really helped me with learning Hindi, I'm still learning to this day, I hope to be fluent eventually, has been listening to Bollywood music. Like, I always have Bollywood music on. When I was in India, I was constantly listening to Bollywood music, especially about songs that included vocabulary that we were just learning. And it's really fun whenever you like listen to a word and you're like, oh, I know what that means. It really starts to get you to understand the material and also understand more colloquial phrases through Bollywood songs and also Bollywood movies themselves. So yeah. And then in this picture, the upper left is just a screenshot of us doing one of our dances. And then beside that is a picture of our music class. We incorporated lots of instruments. We had the tabla, the harmonium we would play, and I think we also played the guitar as well. And then the bottom right, that's just a picture of one of our art classes that we did. And then you can go to the next slide. Oh yeah. Does that video play? If this works, this is like a video of the performance that we did at the end of the year. I mentioned that we did a community gathering where we were able to perform our dances. So this is a clip, but it's okay if it doesn't play. Okay. Okay, I think that's good. So yeah, that was a dance of one of 3 that we rehearsed literally just once a week in our class, and it was so much fun to perform at the end of the year. At that reception, we also all had like a 1-minute speech that we had to give fully in Hindi. So my speech was actually about dance in India. So that was really fun to give like a whole speech on how dance was able to impact me and my time there. I really think the most impactful part of it was connecting with my host family. My host family was a family of dancers. My host sister did Bollywood class 3 times a week. I had 2 host sisters. The younger one did Bollywood class 3 times a week. The older one did Kathak classes 3 times a week. And then my host mom did another, like, I think she did actually a Rajasthani folk dance like 2 times a week. So everyone in my family danced. So it was a really fun way to get to connect with them. When everyone was home, usually around like 11 p.m. because my host dad worked really late, we would just turn on music and just dance for like an hour until we all got tired. So definitely one of the most fun experiences I had in India. And then I also really just wanted to emphasize kind of more of the lifelong impact that my time in India, specifically with dance, has had on me. I know I just recently went, it was in 2019, so it's only been a few years, but in that time, when I got back, I went between my junior and senior year of high school. So my senior year of high school, I ended up joining 4 different dance teams at my school. My school actually has a ton of dance teams. I joined a Bollywood, Bharatanatyam, Garba Ras, and Bhangra clubs at my school. So those are all different styles of dance in India. I know that sounds like a lot, but they weren't super time commitments. So it was a lot of fun. And then once I got to college, I really wanted to be able to continue dancing. I had missed dancing over the summer, and it's something that I just fell so much in love with when I was in India, and then being able to continue on with that in high school. So I ended up joining 2 dance clubs, Tar Heel Ras and UNC Cholka, my freshman year. And then I'm currently just on UNC Cholka, which is a Bollywood fusion dance team that competes internationally. And it's my family. It's been so much fun. That's a picture of them in the upper right-hand corner. And then some things that I've also been able to do is not only have I learned a lot of Hindi there, but being able to come back and continue to learn Hindi at my university, I feel very fortunate that my university offers a minor in Hindi Urdu, so I'm able to continue my studies. So I've taken several Hindi classes in my time here so far, and I've also taken a course on the history of music in South Asia, and I've actually been able to virtually study abroad again in North India. And then, yeah, being able to pursue a minor in Hindi or Urdu has been a lot of fun, because some of the classes that we get to take are like, medicine in India, and it's taught completely in Hindi, or there's another music class that's taught completely in Hindi. So you really do get to learn. Like, I know for the summer you're only there for 6-7 weeks, but you learn so much while you're there. You learn so much language while you're there, that if you do want to continue studying, you're not starting off at like square one. I was able to skip the first level of language when I went into college, and that was from going from absolutely no Hindi knowledge going into an NSLI-Y to, at the end of it, I could carry on a conversation. And now I'm hoping to be fluent at the end of college. So it really does give you the opportunity to learn more than you probably would in a semester of a high school or college class, language class, because you're just so integrated into the community. You're so integrated. My class was completely immersive. We weren't allowed to speak English in it. So yeah, I know it sounds like really scary, but I promise you'll learn so much. So yeah, that's kind of what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Megan. And it's great to hear about yet another art form, dance, that has led to further cultural understanding and language learning. Thank you again. And last but not least, we have Hadia. So Hadia is an alumna of the 2018-2019 NSLI-Y Arabic Academic Year Program in Morocco. She is currently a second-year undergraduate student pursuing degrees in journalism, global studies, and global health. Since participating in NSLI-Y, she returned to Morocco for a semester through her university to further study Arabic and Moroccan culture, society, politics, and art. Her interest in cultural exchange with the arts has led her to be an intern at the Cultural Programs Division of the State Department's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs through the Virtual Student Federal Service Program. Hadia, take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I participated in the NSLI-Y Arabic Academic Year program in Rabat, Morocco from 2018 to 2019. And I'm going to be talking about how photography was kind of like a gateway for me to make connections and meet new people and really push myself to speak the language every day. So you can go to the next slide. So like Dana mentioned in her presentation, compared to where I'm from, which is like suburban Arizona, Rabat is like a really artistic city because like she said, at the time, it's not true anymore because of COVID, but at the time you could go out on any night and find music on the street, dancers on the street, you could find artistic and cultural events happening all the time. And so because where I'm from, I couldn't really do that. That kind of inspired me to dive into the artistic community in Rabat. And so NSLI-Y required, at the time when I was in the program, we were required to pursue an internship or a volunteership with a local organization. And we were also required to pursue a capstone research project. So essentially we had to research a topic throughout the year and then present our research at the end of the year in the target language. So I decided that I kind of want to explore like the artistic influences on young artists today and the stories that they want to tell through their art. So you can go to the next slide. So I started an internship at Cafe Renaissance. That's the place where we saw Dana singing in her video that she shared. And so I was interning there as a photography intern. And basically they have like jam nights every Monday night. They have artistic and cultural events, live music, artistic workshops. And I was just working as a photographer to, you know, kind of capture the events for the organization. But it was the perfect thing for me in my project because it was like a way for me to meet Moroccan artists and put myself out there and basically introduce my project to so many different people every day. So I decided to start a project called Voices of Morocco. You can go to the next slide. And the idea behind it was that I wanted to use photography and videography to film different artists presenting or performing their work, and then interview them and ask them about like the meaning behind their art, why they chose that art form, the stories they're trying to tell, their influences, their inspiration, just to explore like the artistic influences in the scene in Rabat. And I thought that this would be a good way to meet new people and learn about Moroccan culture and art and really push myself to speak Darija every day and not just like at a surface level, say the same things that I would have to say on a daily basis, but actually push myself to use more complex vocabulary and actually push myself to communicate my ideas. So this project was key to my entire experience because it's pretty hard to make friends in a new place where you're just starting to learn the target language. It can be hard for students to like put themselves out there and try to make connections with people when there's nothing at the basis of that relationship apart from you want to get to know someone. It can be hard to like approach people and just say, hey, I kind of want to get to know you. Do you want to grab a coffee? But when you have a reason to ask someone to sit down with you, it can make it a lot easier for you to push yourself to actually approach someone and, you know, tell them why you want to sit down with them and get to know them. So this was a great way for me to meet a lot of people because it kind of gave me that push that I needed to actually approach people and talk to them and tell them about this project. And of course, like most of the time when I would approach artists and tell them about this idea that I had, most of the time they would be interested and engaged and they wanted to be a part of it. And so it was like immediately a way to sit down with someone and have a meaningful conversation. So I got to know musicians, actors, dancers, circus artists, poets, people from different backgrounds with different stories to tell. And the project kind of facilitated that cultural exchange between me and the participants, and it really motivated me to learn Darija because I needed to. And this is key to like language learning, especially in immersion programs. A lot of times students feel like they're learning vocabulary and they're learning things that they're going to use one day, but the whole point of immersion is that you can use that language every single day. So when I sat down to actually study something in Arabic or in Darija, it was for things that I knew that I would have to say later that day, or the next day for a specific project that I was working on. So that was a big motivator for me, and it was a way for the vocabulary to actually stick in my head, because I knew when I'd need it, and I knew that I would need it soon. You can go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit to potential NSLI students about why artistic pursuits are beneficial for exchange and language learning. Pursuing something artistic gives you something to connect with people over. Dana spoke about this a little bit. It can be hard to connect with people and really get to know them when there's a language barrier, especially when your vocabulary is limited and you're just starting to learn the language. And art is something that sometimes can express or communicate something that's deeper within you that sometimes you can't even express in your native language. So having a connection through art is sometimes the initial connection you need to actually push yourself to start communicating with words. Like Dana said, it could build connections where language couldn't yet. It's like that initial link that you need to actually get to the step where you actually push yourself to use the language to communicate with people. So yeah, having deep and meaningful connections with people is kind of a key motivator in language learning, because it can be hard to make friends in a country where you've just begun learning the language and about the culture. NSLI-Y does have ways for you to connect with people, like our language partners, and pushing us to be involved in an internship or a volunteership. But pursuing your own project can be like your own intrinsic motivator to push yourself to learn the language, and something that is really meaningful and valuable to you. So I encourage NSLI students interested in arts to pursue artistic projects that require mutual collaborations. And this doesn't actually have to be just about the arts. Any project, it could be STEM related, it could be related to any topic that requires you to collaborate with other people in your community, is something that's going to push you to communicate your ideas effectively and also understand other people's ideas. Because if you have this common goal, if it's a project or a final product or an idea that you want to put to life, and you need somebody else's input to actually put it to life, then you're pushing yourself essentially to build your vocabulary in a certain way where you can effectively communicate your ideas and you can effectively understand other people's ideas. So collaborating on a project, creating any kind of project where you have to connect with the local community, whether it's interviewing people or actually connecting with people who are interested in the same thing and working on something together, is a really big thing for language learning. And also it's a big thing in diplomacy. Cultural exchange to the arts is something that the State Department pursues and sponsors itself, because especially through the arts, collaboration through the arts is something that's it promotes mutual understanding and peaceful relations between countries and between people. So going back to how it benefited me specifically, photography was kind of a gateway for me to develop meaningful relationships with people, and connecting with those people was a big motivator to push me to learn Darija and Arabic. And mutually collaborating with artists on artistic projects pushed me to learn to communicate and understand deeper and complex ideas in Darija and Arabic. And lastly, I kind of left NSLI with a lot of strong friendships because of it. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. So I kind of fell in love with working with musicians in particular. So when I went back home to Phoenix, I connected with a small pocket of musicians in downtown Phoenix and started working with them as a photographer, which was really nice. And I got to share stories with them too about art and music in Rabat and where I used to work. And last year, as Alexander said, I also entered at the Cultural Programs Division at the State Department, which sponsors cultural exchange through the arts. They have really cool programs, like, for example, One Beat brings together artists from around the world to different countries to basically collaboratively make music that fuses traditional music styles from around the world. And so it's collaborative music making of genres that have never been mixed together before. So it's pretty cool. And they have so many different programs like that. You guys should definitely check it out, because it's not really it's not really known or publicized. And finally, I worked, two of the bands that I started working with during the project had just kind of formed when I was working on the project. And now they're still going, and one of them has finished recording their first album. Another one is on their way to finishing recording their first album. So the first one is Rumors. I still work with them pretty much every day. They just recorded their first album, and they're a blues rock band based in Rabat. And they're actually going to be performing at Visa for Music. I think Dana knows what this is. It's an international music festival that brings African artists and artists from the Middle East to Rabat to kind of perform. So they're going to be performing there. So they're really excited. They're going to be going to Casablanca to record on Friday. And then the other band in the corner, on the right corner, is called Risha Band. They play Gnawa fusion music. They actually started as 2 artists who had met through the project that I was working on, and now they're a 10-member band, also performing in different cities and recording their first album. So I left with those connections, and I still work with them. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Hadia, for another great presentation. All of the presenters were great, of course, and all discussed different art forms in different places and how it all enhanced their unique NSLI-Y program experiences. Now, as you can see by the slide, it's time for the Q&A session. So if you have any questions at all, you can ask questions in the chat box. You can put it in the Q&A box. You can private message me. So please feel free to ask any questions. But I will get started with a question of my own. So I'll ask this question, and just picking randomly for Dana to answer first, because I think it kind of connects with what you were saying. I wonder, like, why do you think it is that art, whether it's music or photography or dance, is so good, or makes it possible at least, to facilitate bonds among people from different backgrounds and different cultures and who may not have linguistic understanding?
Yeah, well, that is the question, isn't it? I think it's because it reaches us in a place that words and surface differences don't. I think that there is a connection that's forged when you have a mutual feeling with somebody that is not the same as when you have necessarily a mutual background or even a mutual language. I know that's very abstract, because I think the question is kind of abstract, but that is to say that experiences like, I'm thinking of watching concerts comes to mind. Just because you are kind of all, you're each having an individual experience of that music, of that art form, right? Nobody knows what's going on inside your head and your heart when you're listening to it. But as you're having those individual experiences, you are for that moment in time, a collective that is experiencing something very similar. So it's this, there's the feeling that I get when I attended concerts in the before days, obviously, is I think the best example of why that works. And the feeling that I would always get is that for that, period of time that you're watching this band and listening to this music, nothing matters except for that music, and nothing matters to anybody else. That, like, you're all there for the same reason, and you're all there because of joy. Fundamentally, I think when you share music with somebody, when you share art with somebody, something very similar happens. I know this sounds very hippy dippy. But truly, I think that it's because you don't need words to connect with people when you have music, or when you have art, or when you have your body if you're dancing. It's about finding things that transcend language, but are also languages in and of themselves. I think that's what's key. Like, music is a language in and of itself. Dance is a language in and of itself. But they are languages that are fundamentally different because they speak to your emotion, and they speak to your soul.
Great, thanks for sharing. We do have some questions coming in, but did anyone want to quickly add anything, or?
I think so much of art as well is sort of like building off of each other and learning from other artists, being inspired by influences that you've seen in different places. And I think this is especially applicable when you have these like people from different cultures coming in. I think it creates this synergy where people are really able to build on top of each other and influence each other's styles and perspectives on art, which I think is really, really conducive to the type of exchange that programs like NSLI are designed to foster.
Awesome, thank you. So here we have a general question, and whoever it applies to can feel free to speak up. How was your love of the arts and its connection to your target language used in your essay to apply for NSLI-Y? Did anyone talk about that in their application or remember that?
I feel like I was the most recent, so I don't know if everyone remembers. I remember mine. Like I said, I really had never danced before I got to India. So I don't think I mentioned dance in particular, but I do know that I did mention music. I've always been really, really into music. And one of the only, before I got to India, one of the only, I guess, interactions that I've had with Indian culture was through music. I guess through dance too. I grew up going to Garba a lot, so I guess that is dance. But I grew up listening to a lot of Bollywood music actually. So I did talk about it. So I think that's definitely gives like a unique aspect of an application if you do have experience with music or dance or whatever, and you're looking to expand on that in the target, in the country that you plan on studying the target language.
Great, thank you. And here we have a question for those who attended the summer program in either language. So what percentage of students would you say continue the language learning journey to get fluent after NSLI-Y after attending the summer program? Maybe based on your cohort and what you know about them.
So a lot of, obviously my summer program is almost 7 years ago. So there are a lot of people who are in my cohort who I'm not necessarily keeping up with anymore. But what I will say is that on my year program, there were 12 of us, I believe, and at least 4 were returnees, not including me. So 5 of us were people that had done summer and then went on to do year. And that was a kind of, so I guess I don't know if that helps with you thinking about it. Of my summer cohort, a lot of them went on to study Arabic in college. Beyond that, some of them moved to other places or took up other languages. But across the board, something I have seen happen is that even for people who maybe don't continue the target language that they studied on NSLI-Y after NSLI, frequently they will continue the study of other languages, or they will use NSLI as a jumping off point. So I know a lot of people, we make jokes about this in my university all the time. We say Farsi poaches Arabic students because we have a lot of Arabic students that will come back from NSLI-Y, many of whom will continue speaking Arabic and then will also take up Farsi. And then we'll just go and run with Persian. Know a couple of people that did Arabic summer and then Hindi year. So kind of situations like that, where I think the program itself inspires a deep appreciation for language learning just in general. So that carries over whether it's in the target language or elsewhere. Definitely of all the people in my summer program, everybody went on to study, either keep studying Arabic or study a different language. So that I can say, but I would say about 40 to 50% would probably be the number of people who continue.
Great, yeah, thank you for your answer. And it's great to hear that people continue it for the rest of their life. Hadia, I'm gonna ask this question to you because you kind of made a quick allusion to it. So the question is, what are some other examples of forms of cross-cultural communication aside from art and music, like whether it's technology or STEM? Is there something that you maybe witnessed or heard about or know about a fellow NSLI alum doing?
So just off the top of my head, just because I interned at the Cultural Programs Division, I was working specifically with their creative writing programs. And creative writing is something that really connects people, even when it's across languages. Like there is a creative writing program at the University of Iowa that brings writers from around the world. And that one's pretty cool. I've heard really, really good stories. And also what I noticed is in the creative writing program specifically, alumni really stay in touch compared to any other program that I worked under at the creative program, the cultural programs division. Like the alumni usually of every program, pretty much all of them stay in touch, and they all start like a virtual initiative post-program. And they run like literary magazines and like social media pages together collectively, which is like really, really cool. Aside from that, let me think. I know hip hop is a big one because hip hop is something that kind of sprung up in a lot of countries, and it's used for like peace building and like peace building and like and across different cultures that have had that kind of like hip hop movement. What else? That's kind of what I can think of right now. But like pretty much aside from arts, just even like science, technology, math, anything STEM or humanities related, pretty much any topic I think can connect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Megan wanted to jump in on that too.
Yeah, so one thing I actually did in India that I haven't talked about before, I actually tutored a lot when I was in India. My host sister was 13, and her and some of her classmates were really struggling with chemistry and biology. And I was able, so over breakfast every day, just about, we'd go over some of the things that she was learning in her class, and I would help her. And it was really fun because it really made me realize that even though we learn from different parts of the world, we're still learning the same things. So being able to help her and some of her classmates was one way that I was really able to connect. And then one of the people who was in the cohort with me, her host dad was like the CEO of some virtual reality company where they do virtual reality to simulate surgeries. And since I was interested in medicine, he actually gave me the opportunity to kind of try it out. So that was a really cool experience, and one way that I was able to use STEM to connect with other people. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities if that's what you're interested in.
I just remembered another one.
Okay.
Culinary arts.
Sorry, did you hear me? I'm just, yeah, if you can make it quick, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say culinary arts. That's a big one too.
Yes. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I misunderstood. Definitely food. Okay, we have a few more questions and not so much time, but we'll try to get through them. We do have a question directly for Megan that was asked earlier, so I want to get to it. And this question is, how did the fact that you were in a predominantly Marathi-speaking location impact your daily exposure to the Hindi language? Were there many people who spoke Hindi in Pune?
Yeah, so it was definitely, I think, a little bit different than some other locations since it was a predominantly Marathi-speaking location, which is really cool because I did get to learn a little bit of Marathi. But yeah, it's a short answer. Everywhere I went, people spoke Hindi too. So it would be like their first language is Marathi, but they also spoke Hindi because in schools there, you're often actually not taught in Marathi. You're actually taught in Hindi or English, unless you go to a Marathi medium school, but a lot of schools there teach in Hindi or English. So almost everyone I interacted with spoke Hindi. So I was still able to get a lot of practice in Hindi. And yeah, not a lot of people spoke to me in Marathi anyways. It was only if it was more of a casual setting where people were speaking Marathi.
Awesome. I'll ask this question for Bliss. What were the language classes like during the program? Was it more discussion based or was it more lecture style?
That's a great question. I think the classes are really designed to get you speaking as much as possible. I think that's the main goal of the program, is for you to really take advantage of the opportunity to be in country, to really practice those instincts, think on your feet, learn how to explain, like, not only just like words and you know, pre-mapped sentences, but actually like start mapping your thoughts, you know, back and forth from English into your target language. So our classes were definitely designed around that. Very little English used in the classroom. A lot of, from day one, a lot of question and answer, group discussions, role playing, scenarios, situations that were really designed to get you practicing and speaking as much as possible. Although I do feel that just as much as I learned in the classroom, I was able to learn with my host family and outside as well. I do think that's really where I often use the classroom as a bit of a laboratory to test out words and expressions I'd been hearing at home with my family and on the streets. And then, you know, I think maybe I understood this sort of phrase or the way a sentence is put together, and then I would try and replicate it with my teacher, and the teacher would say, yes, that's right, or no, you have to edit this. So there's definitely some good synergy between the learning in the class and outside the classroom as well.
Yeah, thank you, Bliss, for bringing up kind of that way that outside the classroom, inside the classroom can reinforce one another and work together. That is actually all the time that we have for questions, though. So I'm just going to take a final minute to briefly conclude the event and share some resources. Kyle, if you can share the slides again. So As you can see on this slide, if you're interested in learning more about the NSLI-Y program, and in particular the application, because it's the application season, please visit the NSLI-Y for Youth website at nsli4youth.org. Applications are now open and the deadline is November 4th. So if you're considering applying, as you can see from all of our speakers, please do apply. And if you're more interested in learning about the student experience and alumni stories, then you can visit the NSLI-Y Interactive website at nsli-y-interactive.org. So we hope that prospective applicants attending this webinar on Zoom or on Facebook will apply to the program. Before everyone goes, I would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out this very brief survey so we can learn about what you thought about the event and make sure we can continue to provide quality virtual events for everyone. And thank you everyone for attending. I know it's a bit late, and especially for Hadia, who is currently in Morocco. So I think it's 2 a.m. at this point. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining and sharing about your experiences. It was really enlightening, and I'm sure that our attendees appreciate it as well. So thank you again, and have a good rest of the night. Goodbye. Thank you.